What is up, everyone? I'm here with the one and only Andrew Ellis. Man, this guy has been smashing it. If you're not subscribed to his YouTube channel, do it now. I'm a huge fan. I learn a ton from him. He's one of my number one sources for key info, and he's posting like almost daily. So yeah, make sure to subscribe to him. So what's up, dude? Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. I know I was saying to you before that you were one of the reasons that I got started on YouTube. So being here is like a fanboy moment where I'm able to talk to you face to face, which is just crazy to me. So thank you for having me on.
Man, my pleasure. It's crazy that you say that because I'm also like a fanboy of you too. And like when I first saw you under a K subs, I remember being like, oh my God, this guy's going to be huge. And I think I commented and you're like, dude, no way, NFT Pirates. And now like, man, I think you're going to pass me after this video in terms of subs. Like, so you're now the new guy, man. I mean, it's amazing.
It's so exciting to see all of like the Veve creators building each other up. You know, sometimes you get those ones who they try to create toxicity and bring each other down. But for the most part, anyway, most of the content creators are wanting to collaborate with each other and wanting to see each other grow to the extent where we could do this as a full-time job, where we could push ourselves to that stage. Exactly. So the fact that we've been able to do that is just, it's surreal. It really is.
Amazing, right? And I mean, like now with all these other Veve YouTubers coming up, like every day I'm seeing, 10 to 15 other people join, and I'm like, wow,
it's so good. And that's always a great thing. I think some people maybe think there's going to be an oversaturation, and maybe in a couple of years from now, there might be, but as of right now, the more creators that you can get out there, the better. It's the more exposure for Veve, it's more exposure for what the platform and community is as a whole. And I think it's great.
I totally agree, man. And how are you feeling about that Walt? I know you bought it for like 2.5K back in the day. It's insane to see the prices.
Oh, it was the scariest decision I have made on Veve because I sold my duplicate Todd McFarlane for 1.1K and my duplicate Superman for 700 in order to get that for 2.1. And it was the scariest decision I made. But I stayed convicted with my plan. Is like I always say, I had a plan, I stayed convicted with it, and I bought it and I never looked back. And obviously it seemed to have paid off so far. So
yeah,
so we'll take it.
It's insane, man. I think like by market cap, somebody put out some like a post today. I think it's like $140 million market cap on Walt alone. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's insane, man. But bro, like, I just wanted to commend you. You made so many amazing videos, but one of them that stuck out to me was the Master Collector Program video that you talked about, like, how we actually might see a major run now to go complete sets. And my question to you is like, what could that look like? Should people almost be preparing and like looking at getting cheaper NFTs that, so that when the Master Collector Program does come, that they don't have to like liquidate their Grails as an example. Yeah. So just curious to hear your thoughts more on that.
I think there does come a point where people are going to realize that this will be the case. But if you're someone who's forward thinking, now would probably be the best time to start getting the sets or items that will give you the most Master Collector points. Because what I looked at in that video was that once the lobby system comes into play, it means that more people have a chance of getting in, meaning a less % chance of actually getting it. So maybe there comes a point where your Master Collector points actually give you the highest chance that you can of getting this drop. And if something like Darth Vader Ultra Rare is coming out, or Yoda Ultra Rare, or you've got Pokemon coming out, then your percentage chances of doing so, you're wanting to get the best chance. Everyone wants to get the best chance. That's why we watch the tips and tricks videos. That's why we try to optimize everything we can in order to get these drops. People are going to do the same when it comes to the Master Collector Program. And if you can be ahead of the game now, I feel you might reap the rewards in the future if you're just a little bit smarter than the average consumer. And I get that a lot of people are worried about whales and how they're going to handle that because they're obviously having way more sets than us and they're going to get way more points in the beginning. But what you've got to remember is that once you win from one of them, all the points disappear. And once the points have been gone for 6 months, they're also disappearing. So there's going to be certain windows that you will be able to have a significantly higher chance than the majority of whales if they've spent it on other things. So I think there'll be a narrative shift. There'll come a point where people will realize that the Master Collector Program could potentially give them a higher percentage chance than the lobby system. And that's when they start to pay more attention. But what about yourself? What's your thoughts on that?
Man, I think those are fantastic points. That's part of the reason I wanted to have you here. You're so damn articulate. Yeah, I mean, and this is where I think some interesting things might happen, right? So as an example, like I've got a secret rare Spidey right now and a Walt in my collection. I'm like, geez, just those two alone is like 100K. Should I liquidate and go complete a ton of sets?
Uh-huh.
And maybe on top of that, get all these different points for, like you're talking about, future grails.
Yeah.
That like maybe if I didn't do that, I would never have a chance of doing, right? So it's like it's a really interesting one, and one might outdo the other. The only thing that I worry about is like right now I look at the stuff that I'm holding as like gold bricks, and I'm like, do I want to get rid of the gold bricks in hopes to get more gold bricks? But like if I'm already holding them, like I don't know if I would take that sacrifice. So the other thing that I've heard from people is that when the Master Collector program comes out, people are going to be liquidating their grails to go get more like sets, and at which point you might then go grab more grails.
Yes.
So there's so many different ways, I guess, to think about it. But I think I'm on your side. Like I'm trying to play both cards. I'm trying to have like some good stuff, but then at the same time, like I'm trying to like stock up on stuff that's like $80 right now. And I'm like, okay, this should pay off, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. Over the long run, you know, that game that you're talking about is a hard one to play. It's a stressful one to play. Because your emotions are involved in it and a lot. And I would obviously, as you'd said, you know, just keep the grails, because at the end of the day, we do classify them as gold bricks at the moment. And I think they'll continue to be. But, you know, imagine the opportunity you have if you play it a little bit smarter than the average consumer right now. Something like 3 or 4 Star Wars sets do come out and you happen to get the ultra rare from a drop raffle. By you taking the time to spend, let's say, 1,000 gems on completing certain things that will give you the most points, or getting rare comics, which have been shown to give you the most points in regards to the money you're spending on them. And that happens to get you the ultra rare Darth Vader. You could potentially see him of upwards of 15, 20, 30K if we keep seeing the things going the way they're going over the next coming years. You could even see that as something like 50 to 100K if we keep going the way that Veve's going. So that sacrifice now to make that for that potential ROI on doing something that doesn't really exist. You know, MCP points don't have to exist. They don't have to be there. For you just to be a little bit smarter now could pay off 100,000 x-fold if you're ahead of the game, and get lucky, of course.
Right, man, beautiful. And one of the things that you said that I think a lot of people are sleeping on is those rare comics, because they're so cheap. And what is it, like 2 to 3 points a day?
2 points, I think you get a day for rare comics at the moment.
Right. So I mean, there's a great answer. And I mean, some comics right now that are rare are like $50, right? If I'm not wrong.
And then you're taking, so you would say the commons are they 0.1?
I think it's 0.1, yeah.
0.1, so you're having to spend a lot more to get there, and the uncommons are 0.25, which again, you're having to spend a lot more to get there. Although they don't diminish on duplicates, it still seems like buying a rare at 50 gems compared to a lot more uncommons and a lot more commons for a lot more money. You're maximizing your points for what it could be. Now, I get it that 2 points, if you're buying like 10 rares, it's not going to be insanely significant right away, but points build up just like anything. You know, as consistency goes on, points build up and they allow you to have more leverage when you're getting more raffle tickets.
Right. Wow. So interesting. And the other thing that I see now too is like potentially these sets, instead of being so lopsided where, you know, you have like something like that's 50K and then 10K and then 4K, maybe now it's like 40K, 20K, 10K, like maybe it's going to be more even, because again, like they're showing with these MCP points that like having all of it's going to get you more incentive to get something, like you said, another grail.
Definitely.
And how many more grails do we have? Like probably hundreds. Like, I mean, like you said, a few, like Darth Vader, Yoda, Boba Fett, the Mandalorian.
That's just Star Wars.
Yeah, that's just Star Wars.
It's 130 others.
Legolas, Aragon. I mean, we could probably sit here, you know, even cars, automotive, fashion, watches. I mean, there's so many things that are coming. Yeah. And so you're right. Like, I think, like, you know, as much as we are already so lucky to the stuff that we have now, like the top 6 superheroes already in here. I mean, that's nothing to compare with the worldwide memorabilia. Right?
There's so much more. And I think a lot of us are still underestimating the collectors just as a whole. I know I've been talking to Sleeping some more in Comics and Crypto, understanding comics. And it just seems like even their small community within comic book collectors is nuts. You know, there's so many of those. There's millions of those people. And I never knew that. I was never a collector before. So I didn't have a clue about collecting. And it just goes to show that that's one single area. And there's hundreds of others that people are collecting of different things.
Right. Wow. It's amazing. And you know what? One thing that I'm really happy about is David, you did say that there's going to be always a level of collectability. So as much as they might like increase edition sizes, I think they still want to keep a lot of things scarce too over time so that it does have a lot of value. But my question is like, you know, what if Darth Vader does come out and the ultra rare is like 15,000 mints because there's so many damn users?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the future holds. And then that's also like, well, I'm like, are people sleeping on the current things that we already have? Like, what if Superman is a secret rare in 2 years from now and edition size for secret rare is like 15,000? Like, but I doubt they'll do that. I think they'll keep similar size mints, but nobody's got a crystal ball, right?
Yeah. So one of the things that I always thought was that as the user base grows, they would take it to the same percentage of user base growth, depending on the sizes. So if there was 1,000 mints for 100,000 people, they would do 10,000 mints for 1,000,000 people. But it doesn't seem to have gone that way just as of yet. You know, it still seems to be like the mints have stayed sort of similar to what they've been at. Maybe there definitely has been a little increase of what's happened, because we used to get maybe 1,750 for the rares and all that sort of stuff. So we have took a little bit of a jump, but I still do see them putting demand over supply for most of the things. There was one video that I'd made a couple of days ago on cards. And if we were to introduce a card company and a card gaming company into Veve, so we would take easy things like Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon trading card game, that would be the easiest to understand. That way you could allow every single person coming in to not need to get into the drops, which are already unlikely to do, buy things like base packs and premium packs. As soon as they get in the app, you get a base pack for completing the tutorial on Veve, which they said they're going to make. And that's allowing people to get in on the fad of, I am a collector now. And I think that right away could be a bridge that you can allow people to still collect as a whole in the digital collectibles and the comics and everything else they release, also get premium cards, but then have a next level of gamifying what Veve is as a whole through card collecting. And what are all our childhoods where when you went into a shop after school, you got a Pokemon card pack, you opened it up and you were the most happy kid you've ever been in your life. Having that on Veve, I've already felt that way for the collectibles. And I think that could be the same to bridge the gap between not getting the drops, still having the supply demand work, and building this up to what it is.
Amazing, man. Dude, like it's all happening so fast, dude.
It's too fast.
Yeah, it's too like I need a slowdown. I'm like, I think I'll get a Wonder Woman. Well, I'm like, I should have grabbed it because now it just doubled in the last 10 hours, right? Like things are crazy. And I think like now, because I guess there's no lid on this stuff and people are seeing how great these collectibles are, like it's not slowing down. Like, do you think it's gonna slow down soon, or like are we just gonna keep riding this rainbow here?
There has to be a healthy retraction. I always think there has to be. From the markets that I look at, the retractions always happen. But what I often see is that, especially for the Grails, the retractions never go down the same percentage to where they were at before. So one of the ones I looked at today was Superman. And Superman at Disney Golden Moments went down to about 670 gems. That was its lowest it went to. So after that had happened, it took a pump up to about 1,400 gems. And not once has it ever touched 670 again. So after that, it took a little bit more of a pump up again, maybe a month later, to about 3,400. And it never touched 1,400 again. And now we've seen it pump up to 6K. It's took a little bit of a retraction, but I'm guessing we never see 3,500 again, 3,000, unless we see something like Pokemon. However, at that point, by the time Pokemon or something like that is announced that it comes out, we might be 12 months down the line where Superman might be at 25K at that point. So even if he retracts by 50%, he's still not touching the 3.5K that he sat at before. Right. And I think that's what people maybe don't look at as much, especially when it comes to those Grails that we have at the moment. Yes, there might be some things that go back to what they were at a couple months prior, but for some of these things that are extremely, extremely sought after, I don't see them touching certain points again. So to your question, I do believe some of them will continue to ride a rainbow, and it might be a little bit slow at some points, but that consistent rise, especially if Veve continues to market itself and push itself the way they are, you're going to get influencers and people with big money coming in here thinking, what is going to give me the most influence and power as soon as I get in here? And the ones I'm thinking of instantly is Partners, Todd, Secret Rare, Spider-Man, and Superman.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that really, really stand out. And maybe obviously some of the Secret Rare comics, but I do believe some will keep going with that rainbow wave, but it will just be maybe slower than some may think, because there will be waves of downtime and uptime and all that sort of stuff. It's just healthy for the market.
Yeah, and I need a downtime, man. I need to
Same.
I'm like,
I need to breathe.
Yeah, I'm like, why didn't I grab 6 of those? Like, it's so frustrating. So I've got a cool, like just kind of tailing onto that, which I think is like some great points you bring up. It's like, one guy messaged me the other day and he's like, dude, he's like, I've got 10 Todds. He's like, I'm thinking of like liquidating a bunch and getting a secret rare Spider-Man. And I'm like, well, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. I mean, like, you got 10 Todds. I mean, you're already in an amazing position. And I'm like, it's the first ever Veve NFT, like, et cetera, et cetera. We can go on about how important Todd is. But my question is like, you know, a lot of people will be able to build social capital off these things that are very like scarce, limited, and extremely popular. And like Secret Rare Spider-Man has like popularity and scarcity. It's like it's pretty much the best bang for your buck. And if it adds utility, then who knows where that continues to rise to. But like, what do you think like people should be doing? Like, if like, because I think it's depends on the person, but some people are just going after like really like key things, like just big grails or things that are really scarce limited. And other people are playing more on like the lower level side of things, just completing a ton of sets, cheap sets, you know what I mean? And just kind of growing a slow foundation. But I mean, I just started thinking about like YouTube, like you and I, like if you could, you know, you like Bored Apes as an example. If you had a Bored Ape, you can flex it on your Twitter, you get a ton of followers. We could be doing the same thing with like Secret Rare Spider-Man or Walt.
Of course.
But I'm just curious to hear your thoughts, like, you know, what people might think. Is it dependent on that person, or is there like an actual strategy that people should be employing? Do you know what I mean?
In terms of building status through the collectibles that you have?
Yeah, like status, and I would say status and like long-term like money, because like as an example, with 1,000 Secret Rare Spider-Mans, if you're renting them out in the Veveverse, you might have like a way higher demand because there's fewer of them, as like somebody that's like really like ample, you know, might only be like $50 a day, as like a Secret Rare Spider-Man might be $250. And then on top of that, you get that clout. But I'm like, at the same time, you then get rid of 10 Todds, which I don't think is smart either. So it's just, I'm just curious to pick your brain. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing.
No, I think I know what you're going for. And it's a challenging one, because I think it all depends on what can be used moving forward. So say we take the lower end, right, and we look at something like Marvel Mighties. If they become involved in a game, that strategy of buying multiples and multiples of them could make a business in the Veveverse be incredible. And that status you have from that is something that you become that the rent guy on Veve. You're someone who creates videos on renting and the strategy on creating a business within the Veveverse. And then you've also got the other side of the Secret Rare Spider-Mans and the Todds about the status that you have. And I actually do believe that in a couple of years from now, having a Todd or having a Secret Rare Spider-Man or having a Walt, especially if the collectors and holders are able to do it and able to push it in that right way, could be something like the Bored Ape Yacht Club, where it's a status symbol. You have this, you are someone who believed in Veve when probably many didn't, and knew that this was going to become something. And I'm guessing a lot of the Bored Ape Yacht Club owners were the exact same. People bought a few of them, people minted them, people bought them at 1 Ethereum and didn't sell because they knew that this was going to be something life-changing. And I think if we have the continuation of what Veve is, things like that will be. So in terms of your strategy and what you were saying and what people could maybe implement for themselves to make a return on investment when doing so, I guess it all comes down to your liquidity that you have, you know. I think at one point they said that the majority of users have less than 100 gems on their account. So by that status, you know, you've not got a lot of people who are going to be able to own Spider-Man at this point, not going to be able to even buy Todd McFarlane anymore or Superman. People are going to be outpriced very, very quickly. And that's when you have to not be sorry for yourself, but strategize on how to actually push yourself forward. And things like the Marvel Mighties could do that. Things that may have more utility than others, things that make sense to push forward with what's going to happen. You know, people who are talking about the Ultraman because we didn't have localization yet, and Ultraman in Asia is seen as a Superman in Europe and North America. So being smarter on that front and buying them when nobody's talking about them, I always feel that's the best strategy to learn to not only leverage the ROI, but have status within Veve and within the consumers and the collectors and the followers on Twitter themselves to show that you're someone who thinks differently to the average consumer. I think I answered the question.
Dude, beautiful, man. Yeah.
But
I mean, that's brilliant.
Else, let me know.
No, I mean, I think the best part about what you talked about there is that there's good reason and good merit for both sides of that argument, right?
Yeah.
Like you just said it perfectly. Like you could be the rent person in the VV verse for like, let's just say you stocked up on like Marty hoverboards, and then now that's like the number one way that people are getting around, and you're like renting them out like $10 a day at the thousands, and that was your focus, right? And then like, you know, like you said, then there's people walking around in a secret rare Spidey skin or a Todd skin, and people are like, wow, like you were one of those first people. Yeah. And so yeah, like I mean, I think there's good merit for both, and that's the crazy part now, is that like there is no objective strategy in this or way to do things. Like it's really, I feel like it's like everything's going to be complemented, whether you're a set owner, whether you're going after, you know, things that are really expensive, whether you're just kind of like, you know, focusing in on one thing like black and white series only and being an expert in that. And that's why Reese always just said to me, he's like, just collect what you like. It's like, stop thinking about it. He's like, just go collect what you like. Everything's going up.
You really do got to collect what you like and enjoy. And there's a lot of people, and I'm guessing you get a lot of the questions as well, you know, what should I buy? What should I sell? Should I sell this? Should I buy this? And I'm thinking, you know, that it's great by all means that you want to learn how to better yourself and how to make better decisions. But at the end of the day, your plan has to be the one you're convicted in. If I tell you a plan to go with, you're not going to be convicted in that because you've not made that decision for yourself. You know, you can teach people how to do things, but through their own experiences where they learn the most. And that's where I learned the most. I'm guessing that's where you learned the most, and every other person that's created content or bought anything on Veve. So when you are asking people for advice, you know, you really just have to have your own convicted plan. I'm going to buy at this price. I'm happy with that. I'm going to sell at this price. I'm happy with that. I'm going to sell for this reason to actually buy that, liquidate, take some money out, anything like that. You have to have that plan. And if you're convicted in your plan, nothing can get in your way, because more often or not, when you make those consistent plans on a consistent basis and you've saw what works and what doesn't, you become smarter as a whole, and you don't have to do as much research in the future because you just know what second nature often comes and what's often happening with it.
Right, man. Excellent. And like, you know, just on that convicted thing, I'm stacking up on Ultramans right now because I'm like, you know what? There were 330 gems of pop, and I'm like, there's same editions as like Superman and these other ones. I'm like, I know it's not like a top 5 superhero, but I'm like, with Japan, you look up Japan most popular superhero, Ultraman comes up almost as number 1, right? So it's like, and Japan has a population of 118 million, and they're way more advanced in tech. So I'm like, it's just a matter of time, in my opinion, before it pops, right? So you're right, doing the math in your own head and making those convictions. So So my next question to you, man, I mean, and this is where I get excited, is what happens when ETH pours in? Like, are we seeing like some crazy stuff here, or are we all like just, you know, over anticipating this? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, is this really going to change everything?
I think there will be a jump. I don't know how big in the beginning it will be, because I think it depends on where Veve is at the time when they do it, when they allow that to happen. Because obviously everything isn't going to be available on Immutable X right away. It will most likely be the individual artists. And then you've obviously got different things that could happen with that. So I feel once we maybe get 2, 3, 4 years down the line, when companies really do see the significance of allowing things like that to happen on different platforms like Immutable, like OpenSea, that's when we will really see the jump. Because maybe by that point as well, Pokemon has been announced. And I feel if then that's announced, you know, that's when big money can come in, because the people now know this is something to not be messed with. I don't know why they don't already think it's the case, because there's Disney, Marvel, everything that you could think of. But I understand that the big thing for people is not taking out their money, and ETH is not readily available. So everything has to go through your bank account rather than through Ethereum, which a lot of people have a lot of. So I definitely do believe that there will be massive points of spike when Ethereum can come in, but I think it all depends on the timing of it and what's actually readily available to buy with Ethereum and how we can actually do that. Because then you've got to think of things like OME to NFT. When that's announced, of course, you might not be able to buy a Disney Golden Moments with Ethereum, but you can sell your Ethereum, buy OME, then buy the Disney Golden Moments with your OME. So not only are you helping Ecomi with the OMI token itself, you're helping Veve grow. More people are entering Veve through cryptocurrency, and that's what can help things boom too. So we're obviously looking, again, I'm going even deeper, OMI being announced on Binance and Coinbase. So meaning changing Ethereum to OMI is a lot easier, meaning more people can then pump in. So I think there's a lot of different routes. There's so many areas where big Ethereum can enter and all will enter. I just don't know how much and at what time they feel is the best for them to say, this is something that's going to make me either a lot of ROI or build status within this space that's building out. Wow. What's your opinion on that?
I mean, I agree with you completely. Like, I think that there's other things that I think prohibit some of this fast growth. And that's just by talking to other NFT people, like in the ETH world, that say, I want my own keys. Like, I want this to live in my hot wallet. I like uniqueness. Like, I want my one of one to be different. I don't want to have like carbon copies of, 1,000 plus editions. They complain about that. And then I think the other thing is that like sometimes they like to be rogue as much as like these blue chips are coming in. They're like, no, I want like something that's more about community or more. And I'm like, but I don't think people realize is that community, like for instance, Bored Apes might shift. Like if Steve Aoki and LeBron James and Steph Curry go to some new project, all of a sudden Bored Apes kind of fade out. Then it's this new thing. As like with our IPs, man, they're here forever and they're only going to continue to get stronger. So for me, this is like the mutual fund of investing in terms of NFTs. Like this is to me a slow grower. Like this reminds me of like a Microsoft stock at the inception. Like that's how I see our stuff, Yeah.
No, I actually totally agree with you. I always think when there's more barriers to entry, it's sort of like the be greedy when people are fearful and fearful when people are greedy. Right. So on OpenSea, there's a lot of greed from what I see. I've been in OpenSea for quite a while, maybe about 8 or 9 months. That I've been dabbling into it. I've made some decent money on it. But it really, most of the projects are nothing to do with community. Most of the projects are to do with return on investment. And once that goes, the community goes. Right. So when you compare it to something that has been made this year, no roadmap has actually been developed or executed. And most of the time, they want your money first before they do anything that they've said they've promised. Compared to IPs that have been around for decades now, have shown time and time again how their movies, TV shows can make billions of dollars, even in merchandise, making billions for them. And now they're on a platform that has all of them together. A community forms within every single individual area. People are here for Back to the Future. People are here for Batman. People are here for Disney Golden Moments. People are here for Elsa. People are here for Spider-Man. People are here for Superman. And that all collectively comes in together to what Veve is as a whole. So you're bringing people with branded, licensed companies that have made billions, something that you've grown up with and loved, all together in the one place, for then you to not only form a community, but then start collecting out with of what you already loved. I completed the season 2 Mermicorno set the other day. Oh, nice. Didn't have a clue what they were before I started this. Never heard of Tokidoki in my life. Now I've researched Tokidoki, understand what they are as a company, I enjoy what they do, and I enjoy their collectibles. That's something that would have never have happened if I didn't enjoy Veve, what it was. It didn't bring me in because of Batman, and I didn't actually stay because of what Veve was actually building. So I totally agree. Veve is a slow burner. Veve is something that is not willing to accept that, oh, we're just here for a couple of months. We're going to get some people a return on investment, some people building a community and some nice friends. No, we're here for decades. We're going to be the top 1% of these NFTs that actually last. Because we'll see in the next few years that most of them will be at zero. Most NFT projects will be at zero. I completely agree with Gary Vee when he says that, because most of them will never be able to execute on what they promised or have the cash reserve for when something like crypto winters or recessions happen. Whereas when Veve are building up what they're building up now, they have the potential and possibility of showing licensors and IPs that we are consistently selling out. We're consistently bringing in new users, and we're bringing in a community that actually believes in what we're doing. This is why we're here for the long run.
Beautiful, man. And it's amazing too, because like we had all these different subcategories in the real world, like comic book collectors that would never see Pokemon, like as an example, or Pokemon that would never know about comics, and comics that would never know about Tokidoki. And so like you had all these separate fandoms, and then now you're bringing them all into one place, which to me you know, is now just going to like amplify all those other individual categories are now be going to, you know, people are all going to be interested in them in. And it's like, that's the part to me where I'm like, okay, if a Superman first appearance in the real world through a comic book was worth 3.5 million, you know, what's this going to be worth in like, let's say 5 to 10 years from now? And I'm not saying it's gonna be worth that, but I'm just saying like the room on this still at 5K to me is mind blowing, you know?
It really is. And as well, you know, you've got to think about what the shift Veve has created with physical stuff. I've never been a collector in my life. Never collected anything. Not as a kid. Didn't collect Pokemon cards. Didn't collect stamps. I had them. I had Pokemon cards, but I didn't collect them. So I didn't have them in the cases or anything like that. Since Veve, I bought my first ever collectible the other day with the physical Todd McFarlane.
Yeah.
And I was like a kid on Christmas opening that up. I was so scared, like, and so nervous and so happy at the same time to open that up. And I think a lot of people have done the same. A lot of people have started to buy comics. I will be buying comics as well. And I will be buying more physical editions of what I have on Veve. So you're not only helping an ecosystem that has been around for decades, you're bringing in a new form of collector through what Veve is.
Right. Steamboat Willie, man, like I would have never ever bought this if it wasn't for Veve. I wouldn't even have looked at that. Do you know what I mean? I would have never thought it was cool, but now I think it's so cool. And like you said, I mean, some of these stores that were kind of worried about, you know, NFTs and what that's going to do to their market is now they're like selling out a black and white series like no tomorrow. I mean, they're on their third round. I was gonna say minting. That's how obsessed I am with NFT. Third round of making Todd McFarlane statues because the demand's so high, right?
Which is insane to think about. And I think I've read as well that comic book sales digitally last year were around 150 million, which was an increase from the last few years that they've had. I see that continuing to increase. I don't see that slowing down that much. Comic books will start to become something that more and more people get into as Veve starts to produce more and more. People will do it as Veve grows. People will see their collectibles and what they have. They'll see it around and they'll want to buy it. One of the really cool things is I was actually watching The Accountant. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. And he is basically someone who gets paid in other assets rather than money for the job that he does. Because I won't ruin the movie for anyone who enjoys that sort of stuff and wants to go and watch it. But in his drawer, when he opens it up, Action Comics 1 is there, which I know we've not obviously seen it on Veve yet, but I do hope we do see it. I thought that was so cool to see it in a movie and to see it like as a form of payment that they added that in as being the most expensive comic book in the world. So I just find that amazing that it's now made me realize, you know, holy crap, like this is Veve that have allowed me to actually know what that is and actually understand the significance of it.
It's insane. Wow. My God, man. I mean, there's so much cool things on the way too for Veve. Like I was like, we haven't even got into renting and burning yet. Like I saw your video on that too. Phenomenal. And like how much collectibles do you think you have to potentially make it like passive income where you could just sustain a living off your collectibles? So what's your take on that? Like, is that like, what do you think that looks like? Like, is it Todd McFarlane getting rented out for $500 a day, or is it like $10? And, you know, with the burning stuff, like there's just so many things to consider. But like, I look at like a big collector, like Johnny Dunn or the Gale, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure you guys will be good. Like with your social following and everything, like you'd probably just be able to rent out your NFTs every day through smart contract and just like wake up with an extra 500 gems in your account every day. Like, I don't know.
Renting is something I'm very excited for. And me personally, as soon as they announced renting, I thought, how am I going to turn this into my full-time business? Because I not only love Veve and what they're doing, I think businesses can be made through renting. And if they allow that, there's winning on all aspects. You've got the burning mechanism. You've got people who are enjoying things that they may not be able to afford. The person who's renting them out is making some gems as well. Right. And the licensors are happy because they could potentially take a fee, which I think they should. I think that's an important aspect of it. I think people should expect that to be the case. But it's all then about what will people be after and why? You know, things like Walt and the partner statue and the Secret Rare Spider-Man, although they're absolute giants and they will be things that the average consumer will no longer be able to afford, we need to think of why they would rent it out. You know, would there be a reason for them to do so? Would there be meaning to actually rent something like that out? And then again, you've got to go in the other spectrum, where if you're someone who just collects Marvel Mighties and they release a game where you have to have one of the NFTs in order to play the game, that makes the Marvel Mighties significantly more important for the renting style rather than something like the Secret Rare Spider-Man, if things aren't added for a reason to actually hold them. Now, when we're thinking 7, 8, 9, 10 years down the line, maybe you're having people who are hosting events in their metaverse, in the Veveverse that's connected with whatever it is, and having 2 partner statues at the opening of your door shows that you're a rich person. You know, that's what people, they're walking into this event and they're thinking, this, holy crap, this is big.
Right.
But are they going to add anything else that makes them have a significant reason that renting makes sense? Or is it going to be for the status symbol? So that's something that I'm trying to think about more. You know, what's going to make the most sense in the beginning of this renting journey that would make people actually do it? And to me, the first thing that comes to mind is games. That's the first thing that makes the most sense to me when it comes to renting stuff out. I do believe if Veve do become a top 1% company and continue to do so in a decade from now, that things like Partner Statue and Spider-Man and Todd and all that, they will be rented out for status, and people will be able to make businesses through that. But in the beginning, I think it's going to be what's actually going to add value to the people who are choosing to rent those out and then actually buying the rents or renting them themselves. So to me, again, that could be things like games where it's like car games where you're using the hoverboards, the DeLorean, and then you've got games like 3v3 battles with the Marvel Mighties that could potentially happen. That's been a little bit maybe tweaked at and maybe being the case. We don't know yet.
Right, man. That's like so well said. So here's like my thinking around that too. And like, like, you know, you kind of talked about like the gamification, which I agree, like that's going to be the #1 incentive. But I'm also thinking like, okay, so like, let's say Todd, like you talked about Todd partners or something. With a Todd, what if it's like almost like club access? Like, for instance, like you need a Todd to rent it out for the day to get into a party with all the influencers, because we all have a Todd. And so then now you're walking in with your avatar and you're talking to Dan, you're talking to you, you're talking to Taps, you're talking to Cavell, you're talking to all these different guys and girls, just because you've rented that Todd for the day and are now able to be in that community. And like, what's the price of that in, like, let's say, like you said, like a few years time, when a Todd's like 100K and you're like, listen, you know, just for connections alone, you might, you know, walk in and have like, be able to speak with all these people. And so it's like, that's like crazy. Or Steve Aoki's having a concert and he's like, okay, VIP gets Secret Rare Spider-Man. Partners is like intermediate, and then Todd is like, you know, you just get an access, and it's like everyone be renting those things out, and it's like that's just the tip of the iceberg. And then it's like real world utility too. And the one thing that I think, you know, was easy to me, Andrew, was like when they flashed us the James Bond tickets and they're like, oh, you can go see the James Bond movie. I'm like, I think it's just a matter of time before it's like lifetime access to the theater. If you hold Batman for Batman, Spider-Man for Spider-Man, like, I don't know, it just seems like very plausible and nothing that would be that, you know, economically expensive for.
I totally agree, mate. I totally agree. And I'm so happy that you brought that up, because although I do believe there has to be reason for renting out when it comes to Veve themselves, we've got to think out with of it. You know, what can happen? You get premiere movie tickets to the new Spider-Man movie for having the Secret Rare Spider-Man. That's 1,000 people who are going to be able to go and watch that if they choose to do so. You could have things like the Todd McFarlane. And this was something that you'd actually mentioned in your video that you'd done, where you were talking about how important it will be for the people who have these collectibles to drive the status of what it is. So like Todd McFarlane Batman, and how you were saying that the 7,500 people are probably going to have a wider scope of influence than someone who maybe holds a Risso, where there's only 1,750 of them.
True.
So you've not got maybe the same power as you do with Risso as you would with Todd, depending on the people who actually hold them. And that in itself, if the people who do hold them happen to create communities, which we've already seen. We've seen that around Hitmonkey. We've seen that around Jake the Dog. There's been others that are forming, and the apes as well. There will be more that will form. There will be strong groups that will form for Secret Rare Spider-Man, for Todd McFarlane, for Marvel's One Secret Rare. They will happen. And I think it all depends on not only the utility that they give for that, once renting becomes a thing, or even prior to that, to actually start building the foundations for it. But what the holders actually choose to do to make that something that is so significant, people need it and will rent it out for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And the crazy part too is like, imagine like somebody that's a massive influencer will probably be given this for free. Like if you're trying to, if you have a Rizzo club and like Eminem shows up, you might be like, listen, Eminem, like take one of my Rizzos, come join the club, because you know your other 20 are gonna pump crazy, right? And it's like, yeah, like, and I think like the thing too is we don't know what's gonna stick. Like, what if Labracorn becomes the #1 club in the metaverse, right? Because there's so much community and popularity behind it. I mean, like, there's so many things that are still yet to foresee, but I think like the renting aspect is what's so funny is like my friends are all focused on getting a second home so they can rent it out and make passive income, and I'm like, guys, I'll be doing this in the metaverse. Like that's where my focus is. I don't even think about like this anymore, right? So yeah, it's
I agree. We're moving to a digital space. You know, when I've looked at the wider scope of it, I'm not old enough to have been when the .com bubble happened and when social media started to become a thing. But from the research that I've done, it's the exact same progress that we've seen here. People are very, very scared. People are very uneducated and they're not willing to learn. And that's the exact same for the internet, and it was the exact same for social media. Why would I use something online when I can see people face to face? Why would I talk to someone online when I can talk to them face to face? Why would I text them on my phone when I can just give them a phone call from my home phone? Because the world moves forward. And now that we're in the internet era where billions of us use them, the world moves faster than ever before, way faster than ever before. So these shifts are going to happen sooner than people realize. And there's going to come a point where most things in your life could potentially be NFTs. And I think people are still very skeptical when it comes to that front, because they think all NFTs are these 10K PFP projects that are going to go to zero that mean nothing. But there are a whole other range of things that can be done when it comes to that. And I think with that shift in the world, that's what's really going to make this stand out and really going to make this something that people will be sought after.
Wow. Man, I love your knowledge, buddy. I can't thank you enough for coming on. So
Thank you for
I'm just going to keep rapid firing you with questions because
go for it.
Okay, so here's another one. So I actually got some criticism on one video that I did about burning NFTs because I didn't have a good enough incentive to burn it. I was basically saying like, what if people burn their Donnies? And somebody was like, well, that's stupid because, you know, there's only 150 of them. Why would you burn one and then be left and then, you know, only be left with one, right? Like, doesn't make any sense. And I was thinking like, well, what if you can burn it to OMI as an example, but like what other major incentives would you think people would have to like actually burn their NFTs off? And I know you did something on that. So I was curious to hear your thoughts.
So there, as you said that, there's two things I can think about. The first one would be a lot harder to do. And this was, say you'd burn a Donny, or you were going to burn a Donny. You would get access to something by doing that. Now, I'm not 100% sure what it would be. It could be like a certain piece of land in the Veveverse. It could be access to a whitelist of any project that you choose, any drop that you choose. Something that incentivizes that burn to lower supply. And obviously that increases demand over time as supply is lowered even further than Donny already is. So that's maybe the more complicated one that would make people potentially want to burn the Grails. Again, for me personally, I wouldn't really plan on doing that unless there were some really big incentive for it. But the other way that I think is more simple is what they've suggested that is the MCP points that you're going to be getting for it. So although I don't believe this will be in regards to Donny, I believe this will be in regards to all of the cheaper collectibles on the platform. Because by doing so, I think a lot of the whales will actually buy up low-priced things that will give them the most points, which makes sense for the Master Collector program to get more raffle tickets for big drops that are going to happen. Therefore, you're allowing a lot more money to come into this space and quickly burn out, which could also work in burning OMI in that sense for the reserve wallet if they do work it in that way. And that allows them to potentially increase demand on things that don't actually cost that much. Now, again, that's going to be more in relation to whales, but it does not mean that anyone couldn't do that. You know, maybe there's something that Veve add where you have to have a certain amount of tickets to get involved into this event or this thing that's happening. And you do that by buying up some things and burning them. And that gives you, then you get your tickets, you put them in, and it gives you access to this event. There's a lot of things that you could do. It's just about making sure that the burn makes sense for the points that you're getting or whatever you're getting for it. I think Veve will have to tweak that quite a few times, just like they've done with the MCP versions on Medium and the OUP versions on Medium. I reckon they'll do it, they'll release it, and it won't be the best the first time, but they'll tweak it and it will actually make it work so that in years from now, burning will actually be a thing that people will probably do quite often.
Wow. And it makes sense what you're saying, because like if there's a huge drop happening and you're a whale with 1,000 Marvel 1 commons, you might think you're not going to burn it. But if you're looking at your points, you're like, oh, I'm a little low, I'd like to have a higher position. Let me just burn 4 because it's not a huge deal for me. And I've got a good chance of getting a Darth Vader. But the good thing is that newbie coming in that just, you know, can only get 1 Marvel 1 comic. Now the supply just went down by 70, let's say. And then, you know, now their bags are bigger too. So it's a win-win solution, right?
Yeah, it definitely can help. And again, you know, if the whales burning all those and then they go in for the drop, say they happen to actually get it just by chance, all of their points are now gone. Every single one of their points are now gone. So they're back to getting the same points they were getting each day from everything that they've collected so far. And they need to start building up again. And maybe the week after another big drop happens, they're like, you know what, screw this, I'm doing it again. And then they burn more. Again, the person who's at the lower end, they're just coming in for the first time. They happen to buy something the last month and it hasn't really moved that much. That whale decides, you know what, I'm gonna burn 40 of those just because I want more points for this. They burn those, price shoots up, demand shoots up, a little bit of FOMO kicks in. They can then choose to sell and they've got a lot more liquidity in their vault. Now I get that's a specific scenario and there's a lot of other variations when it comes to it, but it is a possibility and it seems to make sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me. Like now that I think about it, especially when you have that many damn collectibles and we hardly even know what these master collector points are going to give us. Like we know it's incentives for drops, but I mean, it could be so much more. Like imagine the points can actually like buy you back a collectible eventually. Like, I don't know, right? There's so many things.
There's so many things.
Right. You even talked about, I think you mentioned like mutations as an example, like you burn 2 things within a set to make something like a rare or whatever, right? Like, so, I mean, it's so many things yet to be foreseen, but I think it just goes back to what you were saying earlier about not leaving the master collector program out of your strategy and to at least consider it, because obviously they're going to want to make it amazing. They want people to stay in Veve. Of course. They want you to hold your collectibles. So they're going to make it really worth your while, right?
Yeah. And I think what I would really like to see them do, because some of the complaints that I've had it's just pay to win, rich get richer. And that's the consistent mindset that I've saw. And although I don't believe that there's anything wrong with having that mindset, because in a sense, it does make sense. The more money you can have, the more points you can get from the collectibles you've got. I hope Veve continue to make the main point of this. The more active you're on the app, the more leverage you're going to get, because they've already said, I think it's if you're not active for 2 weeks, you no longer get the points. Is it for your sets maybe that you're no longer going to get the points for actually collecting them, which I think is a great thing to do, because then that increases retention. Again, giving them more bargaining power for IPs, brands, licenses, because they're saying this is how many people we are retaining on our platform. But it also allows people who don't have as many make the grind more fun. That's why you play games. That's why people play Rocket League. That's why people play Fortnite. That's why people play Apex. There is ranks and tiers that you need to get up. And they've already spoken about MCP Pro, where if you're above a specific rank, you're going to get MCP Pro for free. And if you stay above that rank, you're going to consistently do that. And if you go below it, then you're not going to have it anymore. And this is going to work on the basis of the activity that you have in the app, the collections that you're building, the trades that you're doing, the time that you're spending, again, increasing the retention. So I'm hoping that Veve continue to focus more on getting the retention higher, rather than just going the cop-out version of the more collectibles you have, the more points you're going to get. And I understand that is the case, but that's why they've said in the Medium article, diminishing value for multiple collectibles. Of course, there's going to be hundreds and thousands more in the future, so people are going to have a massive, massive wide range to choose from. But in the beginning, you know, there's only so many that you can have. There's so many that you can get, unless you're an absolute multimillionaire. But that's still a very small percentage of people compared to the average consumer.
It is, and it's a huge risk too if you're injecting that much. Like I've got one of my good friends. He's only put in $3,000 in here, and his collection's probably over 500K just from landing drops and being super intelligent.
Wow.
Like he landed like the Marvel comic #1 SR, like he didn't get it on the drop, but he went and bought it in auction for like 1,800. Like he's just been super smart and diligent, but he does invest the time. But it's like, but when I see like a whale coming in and injecting like, $2 to $10 million, I'm like, hey, that's like, that's a lot of money. And don't get me wrong, that's amazing, but it's a huge risk as well, right? Like as much as we all know that this stuff is like, seems like a guarantee, like, the other thing that I always think about, like, what if there's like a recession, or what if like the crypto market crashes, like it's done in 2017? Do you think that would affect our collectibles, or do you think this is like now a new lifestyle that people would be like, I don't even give a shit about crypto, like I'm just in this like collecting aspect, because I am I don't give like I couldn't care too like I don't care what happens out there. I'll be collecting.
I'm the same.
There's probably a lot of people like us, man.
A lot of people will be the same. However, I still do believe there will be an impact if a recession are to happen, or crypto is to crash, like a crypto winter again. People are expecting it to happen. However, we have actually seen, because Ecomi and Veve are still a closed ecosystem, it runs a little bit differently. In the app, I've seen sometimes where crypto has been seriously down and NFTs have been down as well, where some of the things on Veve are booming. And I think that does play a part in the closed ecosystem right now, because there's a lot of people who can get on Veve who don't actually understand one part of OpenSea. OpenSea is 10 times more complicated than what Veve is. So by being on there, they're not paying attention to what's happening in OpenSea. They don't care. So they're buying what they love to collect on Veve, and then also trying to make a return on investments for some of the things. And there's actually been, I believe anyway, if I'm not mistaken, there's been studies done on recessions and their impact on collectibles, physical collectibles and comics in themselves. And it actually has the lowest impact on things like collectibles for recessions.
Wow.
And some of the things that were mentioned, and someone, I can't remember who had mentioned it, but they were talking about Tokidoki. And because there's such a low barrier to entry into Tokidoki, but things now sell for a good return on investment because obviously they're scarce and they move over time in supply and demand. Even within a recession, they were still going for good amounts and still had consumers actually wanting to buy them for a premium, because things like collectibles are a completely different mindset to having something like a stock or a crypto stock, So I think there's a happy medium there. It's probably quite challenging to guess if we've not actually had a crypto winter as we've been out just yet, especially with the number of users that we have. But I think that'll be a very, very interesting time on the app to see what actually goes on.
Very cool. Well said, man. So another question for you. What's your favorite collectible that you own, and what's one that you wish you had?
Favorite collectible is definitely Todd McFarlane. It's got to be. It was one of the first Grails that I got in the app. It was one I always had my eyes on right from the beginning. And I started with $300 on the app, and that's all I put in for a very, very long time. I think the most I think I will have put in total is maybe about $800, $900 since starting. So going from there and trading my way up to where I'm at now, to have a Todd and to actually say that I can own one, and I traded my way to get that. And I think I purchased it for like 400 gems. Is something that I always hold, like, and I will hold for a very long time. Just for the sheer status of having it and just owning it. And especially if I can get the same mint on Veve as I've got here, like that will be, I probably will hold it until I die. And the one that I want the most, I still think it would be Secret Rare Spider-Man. As much as I want to complete the season 1 set of Black and White with Russo, I still think Spider-Man is someone who I've always loved as a character in all the movies and the games and all that. I think that's something that I've always wanted, and I'm kind of gutted I didn't get, but I just did not have the liquidity at the time. Even when it was first out and it was still cheap, I never had the money to be able to purchase that. So I don't regret not being able to get it. It is just something that I would like to add, as I have, the partners, Todd and Superman. I would like to have the Spider-Man to sort of complete that 4, What about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Like, it's funny because you and I both have our favorite. So Todd is my favorite as well. And to show you how crazy I am about Todd, is I was actually considering selling off my secret rare Spider-Man for
Right?
number 55 Todd. Like,
I love
it. That's how crazy.
it.
People in this would be like, that's stupid, because and to be fair, like, I would not see a return on that Todd for probably like 5 years or something. Like to the extent that I'd want, like, at
You'd
least
want
over,
to, yeah.
yeah, like at least over 250K is what I'd want for that. But like, as Secret Rare Spider-Man might get there, and then be the floor would be 250, so it'd be a lot easier to sell.
Yeah.
But I think it's just the sheer status of being like, listen, I'm cementing myself in history right now, because I was here first. Because like, man, like you and I just keep saying, like, how many more things are we going to get in here? How many more categories, Veveverse land, all that stuff. Todd, despite it also being first DC, first Batman, like, it's just a status symbol. It's like saying, like, like you said, it's like Bored Apes. Like, it's like you were here first. It's like CryptoPunks. Like, you know, if we're imagining, like, if you think about it, like, CryptoPunks is like the open sea.
Yeah.
And what if Veve becomes just as big as OpenSea, and then like Todd is that first one, and then a sub 100 Todd being that super specialized one, like, so that's where my head's at.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I truly believe that once we get 3-4 years down the line, right, and the projections keep going, we're potentially sitting at somewhere in the region of 20 to 50 million users, if the projections continue to go the way they want them to go. And then you're thinking of the marketing that will be done by that point, the companies and brands that will be released by that point, and Veve will have their business running more smoothly, because they'll have a lot more workers in their ranks who are established in the Web3 world. They'll have a lot more people helping them push it forward in the best way possible from a lot of different avenues. And then you're also bringing in the likes of influencers, content creators, and people who have status. And you can even think by that point, if we continue to create content for that time, we would be up there with those people. Then having something like the first ever collectible on a platform that has near enough 40 million users, that status is something that I just don't think can be matched by many things, especially if the community who own them and the unique holders who own them are able to show that to the wider community. Because everyone who is big that's going to come on here is going to ask, as we mentioned before, what do I have the most influence with? What can I buy right now that I will have the most influence with? What collectible will it be? And it will be the ones that we've talked about a lot today. That is what they will buy first, no matter how much money it is, because they have disgusting amounts of money to just put into something like that. And that will create status like the Bored Ape Yacht Club can do.
Right. And I mean, like, the more users we get in here, like, the more it's just going to propel the likelihood of that happening. Right?
Exactly.
It's like, and one man that got away from me was that Marvel 1 Secret Rare, bro. Like, I could have bought 5 at the time, just how stupid I was.
For what price? What were they at?
They were at 1.8K and lower. Like, even right after the drop, I think they were like 1.2. And I literally had Golden Moogly sitting there, which I could have sold off, and a few other things that I was considering selling at the right point. And my biggest thing against it was I saw the DeLorean drop when it was 60,000 editions, and like, nothing went up. And I didn't take my time to do like the real research on the comic because I knew less about it. And then on top of that, I was like, well, it was $6.99. That's already a huge run up to 1.2K from there. And then we also didn't have augmented reality at the time. Like, it was just like, you could just flip through it, but no AR. So my head was like, okay, this is like a bit of a gimmick. And I just left it. And then my buddy kept saying, dude, just get it. It was 5K. And then it was 8K. And then it was 10K. And I'm like, okay, at 10K, like, whatever, let it go. And then it hit 50. And I was like, and then everything like went crazy for the comics. I don't know if you remember that period. Like,
I do.
Like 4 or 5 months ago, right? It was like this crazy comic run. And Pride was even, I think Pride was like 9K or something too. Like, we had a big run before.
We did, with the comics especially. So the only secret rare I have is ASM1. I got that on the drop.
You got that on the drop?
Yeah, that was back when I got like 11 on the drop.
Oh my God.
I didn't actually know for about a month that I had the secret rare because obviously the comics back then were like 2 or 3 gems. So I didn't even look at what I'd got. I just sort of like moved on with my life and kept trading and collecting. And then I realized I got it, and that pump up, the ASM one reached 30K at one point. But
crazy.
Obviously it's back down to whatever it's at now, but I'm totally fine with that because it's nuts to see the return that you can get on something. And I wish this is why I think it's so important for people to come in here. When you come into any space, find people who have knowledge on different avenues. If I had a friend who collected comics and I told them what was happening on Veve, I know for a fact they would have told me, get that. Just buy it. Buy some, and that's fine. Now, I still have like 10 commons of the Marvel one. I still do have them, and I have a 774 mint of the common. I bought that for like 270 gems way back.
Wow.
So I was still a little bit ahead of the curve, but if you come into new spaces, find people who are knowledgeable in different areas around that space, because they'll be able to help you make better decisions for yourself. 100%. Because if both of us had just been like a little bit more research intense to go and do stuff, we would have seen that this is more likely to be the case that it would have run up.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if you didn't buy the secret there, just the common.
Right. Such a good point, man. And like that's what my thinking was around the Spider-Man. I was like, okay. I know it's the #1 most popular superhero in the world. I'm like, I know there's only 1,000 of these, first ever Marvel NFT. I'm like, okay, this is like I just have to do it. And a lot of people gave me like a lot of criticism because I bought in at a pretty high point. I think it was like 18K. People were like, dude, like that wasn't smart. But I was like, no, like I think, and like even for you now, like look at partners. Like you bought in at what, 2.5K? I think it was
2.1. I got it at.
It's so wild, right? Like looking back
at
at this. I know. And I think the big thing for people like coming in now that are watching this is like those opportunities are still going to be there. Like there's going to be a new Grail that comes out. It'll probably be like 3 or 4K post drop, and then over 6 months rises to like 25K, right? Like Darth Vader, 10,000 mints even, right? It could still hit crazy numbers. So
I'm selling everything. I'll buy it. I will buy it. I will buy it. That will be what I want. I'll sell my car or something like that just to get the money for it. Like the Darth Vader, something. See if we get an ultra rare, any Jedi or Sith, the lightsaber moves. It's game over. Like
I know
it's game over. And
I agree, man.
We were talking about some other things as well in the live stream, where imagine they do stuff where you create your own lightsaber. And by collecting 8 different parts and joining them together, you get a kyber crystal. And then you're able to show that on a wall, just like a lightsaber on your wall with a display. Think of like all the shit that adds. It's just, wow. Just wow.
Yeah.
There's
and then
so much.
And the amazing thing with the collectibles is we haven't even seen the utility added to them yet. Like, at least with the comic book, you can read it, like it has that utility. But I'm like, man, what's going to happen when there's like added things to these statues, right?
Oh, yeah. And like, I think as well, artists like Todd McFarlane might even do something with having both in the future. If he does get involved more in what Veve is and continues to see that his collectible is the top of the top, and if it does end up becoming that, think of like what he could do with the people who own Series 1 and a physical and a digital one with Veve. There's events that could happen, there's meetups that could happen, anything could happen. There's just so much utility that can be added for each individual thing, especially if these companies are forward thinking, which it seems like they are, because they wouldn't get involved in NFTs if they weren't. They wouldn't get involved in what this is as a whole, and showing just what this space can do if utility is added to even a few of these things.
Man, and we're still so early. Like we're just getting started. And we're just getting started, and things are already nuts. Like if you're an early adopter and you're already sitting at like $500,000 on this stuff, like you could just shut down shop now and just go on a nice walk and just be like, listen, in 2 years from now, we're like Silicon Secure, the guy just interviewed, is like, I think we do another like 5 to 10x from here in the not so distant future. And it's like, wow, right? So
and that just blows my mind.
I know
it really does blow my mind. Like I can't fathom it properly. But one thing I actually think that the Gail actually talked about it. I can't remember exactly what the thing's called, but it's where your wealth increases so significantly so fast that you have to understand the mental stress that can cause. And I think for a lot of people, they have to start thinking about that a little bit more. Your mentality for everything in any life is so critical. And if someone's looked it up. I can't exactly remember the percentage, but it's a very high percentage of people who win the lottery and go back to the same life they were living 5 years later because they spend it all. So one of the things I think is really, really important, and I know it's a little bit more on a serious note, but just to start understanding money mindset and how to look after your money in the right way, especially if you decide in the future to withdraw and change your life forever with what's happened on here.
Right. That's a great point you make. And I think the other big thing too is like for people not to make the same mistakes I did. Like I remember I had like a bunch of Superman at the time, popping them off like nothing. And I'm like, now Wonder Woman is sitting at like 1.6K when she was $100, like, right after the drop, and everyone's like, this is going to go to at least a K.
Yep.
And it's like, so don't be so quick to off your 50 Wonder Womans, because that alone could be a life-changing asset, right?
Exactly. And we're going to have more opportunities to do that. There will be more opportunities. There are people who are bigger than Wonder Woman that will do the exact same. And you've got to just know that trends happen. These things happen over and over again and have happened. People done it with Superman. People done it with Spider-Man. People done it with Batman. People done it with Wonder Woman. They done it with Golden Moments until Walt was finished. Elsa and Homer, they were all at 200 gems. They took a run up to 1,400 in the next 3 days. And they obviously took a retraction after that, but that happened.
Yeah.
Disney. And they were selling for 200 gems.
Yeah.
Partners was at 2.1K. You know, like that obviously changed very quickly, but even in that sense, people underestimate mint numbers, additions, things that will happen. And if you're just a little bit ahead of the curve, a little bit, you only need to be a little bit ahead. And that's by just proactively doing a little bit of research, watching content creators, making your own plan, and stay convicted. You'll win more often than you lose.
1000%. Well, dude, I can't thank you enough, man, for coming on. I mean,
thank you so much for having me.
Like, I mean, you're, like I said, man, I mean, it was, it's just a matter of time before you blew up. Like I said, I'm a huge fan of yours, and your YouTube content is amazing. And like, this is just like a small little window as to what Andrew's channel is all about. So like, please go watch his videos. I mean, so many key videos that you need to see to just better inform you about what's to happen here on Veve and to make more informed decisions for your financial strategy, collecting his stuff. But of course, never financial advice, but just good things to consider. But yeah, man, like, let's do it again. And continue doing what you're doing. And I'll see you at 10K within the next few weeks.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really, really do appreciate it. You have no idea how much it means.
Oh, that's amazing. All right, big guy. We'll talk to you soon then.
See you later.
See you, brother.